everybody who's on the call. It's really good to see familiar names, and it looks like it's going to be a very warm and constructive discussion. We've got a very capable team of panelists that are going to lead the discussion, but I'm glad to say that they will feel that they don't have the entire burden of basically discussing the budget, because the virtual room is full here, and there's going to be quite a lot of interaction going on today. Of course, the budget vote happens against the backdrop of the challenges nationally and globally, the crisis that we are all aware of. And it was in many ways a very tricky budget vote, but we look forward to the discussions and the observations that everybody has made from the speech. And by the way, this event that we are hosting today, we're hoping to have similar regular events such as these, just to promote interaction and discussions around pertinent issues. So thank you very much, moderator, and I would like to just welcome everybody. I hope everybody feels welcome. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, CEO, for that. We are going to approach it in this fashion. I'm not going to be asking questions. Each of the panelists will have about 5 to 6 minutes of time to share what they would want to share. Then afterwards, then I would note and take questions from the floor. From my side, I would want to limit my talk, as we do not have the luxury of time. At this point in time, I would want to welcome to the stage Mr. T Nkunjana from the NAMC. You will start with the introduction, colleagues, as you come in. Then have your 5 minutes of inputs. Mr. Nkunjana.
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone who's on the space. Glad that you managed to join us. So with regards to the budget speech, which is what we came here for, personally, I think this, first off, my name is T Nkunjana. I am an agricultural economist under the agri-food unit at NAMC. So yeah, that's it. So as far as the budget speech is concerned, I think it was a balanced one, as we have seen. I mean, in terms of the constraints, particularly from the economic part of things, it was, as much as we had hopes, expectations, and the reality was that the minister didn't have much room in terms of, going for tax, which is something that I think a lot of us anticipated. And also, of course, the bigger roster, that is the ESCOM, was touched, and also the relief that was given to it, even though that some economists analysts believe that is kind of an a huge burden to the fiscus, and of course going forward to the next few years, it looks like it is going to be the reality for the next 5 to 10 years. It can be even more than that. And then, of course, the winners in being the sugar industry is a winner in there. And also the wine was actually, unfortunately, not spared in that. Otherwise, I think for me, the budget was relatively balanced, particularly because the minister touched on at least the important issues. The ESCOM, as I said earlier, the infrastructure is also another winner, which was something that it was impossible for him to overlook. I think it also talks to the economy issues that we want to achieve. So yeah, that will be it for now from my side, Chair. I will allow other speakers, and then I can always engage as we proceed. Thank you for now.
Thank you, Mr. Nkunjana. At this point, Dr. Thindisa will come in and share his views of the budget. Dr. Thindisa, over to you. In case you are talking to yourself, Dr. Thindisa, you may be muted.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone on call. I hope and trust that I'm audible, Chair.
Yes, indeed, you are.
My name is V Thindisa. I'm from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development in Pretoria. My views and opinions on the budget speech is that it was fair, it was balanced, considering the fiscal constraints that the minister spoke about. In the main, the geopolitics, which are having an impact, an adverse impact on the South African economy, the issues of climate change, in this case is flooding, which are having direct impact in particular on our sector. The issues of COVID-19, even though it's at the tail end. The minister and the national treasury were very consistent, but also promoted continuity. I'm saying this because in the medium-term budget policy statement that sometime last year, but also following through the State of the Nation address by the president sometime a couple of weeks back. One of the main challenges that is confronting that is a negative impact on the economy was the issues of energy, intermittent and erratic energy. And today there is confirmation that about 275 billion rand would then go to servicing the 400 or so with Eskom. So National Treasury will be taking that, and the minister gave reasons why that was, among others, is the issue of government guarantee, but also to they relieve Eskom in terms of their balance sheet. But also the approach was also on the carrot and stick in a sense that the fiscal there are about 4 or 5, and one of them is a revenue stream. And in terms of the revenue stream, tax revenue is about 1.69, which is about 90 or so billion rands jump from the previous collection. And for that, which is a very key component, we then get a top up to increase and improve their efficiencies and system. They then keep the ball rolling in terms of collection. They don't slack on that score. In terms of tax adjustments, there were no major tax adjustments, which was in terms of the conditions that the economy is facing, but also the inhabitants are facing. Unfortunately, for the beverage industry, which sugar tax always an issue, it's still I think there will be an increase of about 4.9%. But of importance in terms of the energy for me would be what they call the diesel rebound scheme, which I trust and hope that it will then be able to filter through into the agriculture and agro-processing space in the main on the downstream side, because that's where the major impact have. And those adverse impact then have a very, very negative impact on the upstream side. But the at least in my perspective is that the open diesel turbines. But if you look at the sustainability of the running of those turbines by Eskom, juxtaposing with incentivizing small businesses, but also households to put solar. The expectation is that when you put solar, then you open up, you ensure that small and medium businesses are able to, and in doing so, then they can have a cash flow of sort, but also then increase the tax collection on the other hand. Hence my use of the word carrot and stick going forward. Lastly, Chair, without taking a lot of time, is the clarification around the emergency relief, which was very key in terms of ensuring that, especially in agriculture, where we are facing quite a number of disaster in various provinces now, to say there are a couple of options that as a sector we might want to consider in terms of recovery and repair, that we would want to have a look as a sector in line with the aspirations of Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan (AMP) of social compacting, to say in those areas, if we were to then as a sector say there is a need to tap into the and repair, what is the process to go forward, and how do we then unlock the funds that the minister spoke about, to say they are ring-fenced for that. The only worry on my side, lastly, Chair, is the debt to GDP ratio, where we are servicing debt at 366 billion rand annually. That's quite a lot, but the projection seems to be stabilized, and hoping that we will not then be going off clip. The interesting part is the posture of National Treasury juxtaposing the Reserve Bank, because the National Treasury seems to be projecting that the growth is much more buoyant. But when you then go through reports from National Treasury, they are far much more conservative, but the conditions and environment are the same. So it will be interesting to see their modeling and how they come to a somewhat different numbers in terms of projecting where they in terms of projecting the economic growth going forward. Let me stop there, Chair, and give others a chance. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thindisa. At this point, I would want to call on Mr. Hale to have his views. And the interesting part is that Mr. Hale's work involves much more than the borders of the Republic. And perhaps as you come in, Mr. Hale, you talk about this in context of what is happening on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonani. And I will start by applauding NAMC for hosting this mini dialogue and bringing the voices of varied stakeholders to be. My name is Francis Hale. I am with FANRPAN, which is the Food, Agriculture and Natural Resource Policy Analysis Network. And we are a continental body and are looking at policies that are aimed at improving or transforming agriculture and food systems. I will not go into the economic analysis and all that. I am looking at this budget presentation from a policy standpoint, especially at a continental level. I see South Africa as a major player, not even key, in Southern Africa, constituting probably more than 50% of all our trade in agriculture or production in agriculture, and having that kind of impact. At a continental level, we are looking at agriculture as the best tool, the best foot forward for addressing the issues of poverty, unemployment, in trying to harness the youth dividend, social inclusivity, women empowerment, and issues like that. And we have signed, including South Africa, all countries have signed to first CADIP in 2003, and the revised CADIP in 2014, the Malabo Declaration, where governments and heads of states made commitments to allocate at least 10% of national budgets to agriculture to enable it to play that role that I described earlier. When I look at this budget, although I do not have full figures, I was trying to look at what 29 from the Treasury website. The allocation to agriculture looks like it's less than 2% of the national budget. That allocation for this period that's coming up is less than 5% increase on the previous year or period. And those allocations are probably a reflection of how we see as South Africa the role of agriculture in addressing the commitments that we made in the Malabo Declaration. Without taking too much time, of the 7 commitments that constitute Malabo, South Africa is not on track for 6 out of those 7. It is only on track on mutual accountability, where we are looking at how we are reporting, how we are tracking, but the rest, it's not on track. And underlying that performance or lack thereof is usually the level of investment that we make against the commitments that we have made. Without going into detail on what these commitments are, financing is one of those, and it's reflected in the current figures. I'm sure the economists on the panel and on the platform would be able to give exact figures, but I do believe that that 2% thereabouts and less than 5% increase from last year are correct observations. So I do think that the region is SADC first, and then in general, and South Africa in particular, would not achieve using agriculture as a vehicle for driving ourselves out of poverty, addressing the issues of employment, because agriculture does that by empowering people without necessarily creating new enterprises and proper jobs as you would have in an industrial setting. So I'll stop there for now, but I do want to bring home that South Africa is way below the commitment from a continental perspective, from what our leaders appended their signatures to. I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hale, for that reflection. Hard-hitting as it is, I'm sure you are communicating it so that we are well aware of the things that we have signed up to and not keeping. Thank you very much for that. Let's have Dr. Kalaba.
Program Director, thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Chairperson?
Yes, we can, Dr. Kalaba.
Thank you very much. Let me also join my colleagues in thanking you and the NAMC for organizing this discussion and engagement. I think it's important that we do follow up and engage and listen to ideas as well as the thoughts that came from such an important event, obviously in our calendar. My other colleagues have already mentioned how the budget, the presentation of it, how balanced it was, and I tend to agree with them. However, I think it is too balanced for the kind of situation and environment that we live in currently. I mean, and they have mentioned the fact that we're still recovering from COVID. We just had recent droughts. Obviously, there are those you can't even include in a budget like this or plan for them. We are having one of the biggest crises in the history of this democracy. So we are certainly not in the normal environment. And I think while the budget is really sensible and try to balance, it needed a bit of aggression in my view, but I'll get to those without repeating what others have said. Maybe let me just start with the areas where I saw positive and encouragement from this budget. I mean, the starting point, the minister did indicate that. So our collection, our tax collection was higher than our expenses, which is a good starting point, that the tax collection actually was higher than the previous year and even pre-COVID. This budget is also more than what it was last year. So as an injection into the economy, that's a good starting point. The issue of taking up Eskom's debt, I think Dr. Matt already mentioned that, it's also helpful in a way that we knew this at some point is going to happen, because each time Eskom took a debt, government needed to guarantee that debt as a shareholder. And eventually, we know the circumstances, the finances, as well as other areas for Eskom that they are facing. It just makes sense, or it was just about time that National Treasury takes up a large portion of that debt. But on the positive side is that Eskom would have a little bit of, avenue to focus on other areas rather than how are we going to pay that debt. Moving into, let's say, the households, I think the issue of rooftops and the incentive thereabout is quite encouraging, claiming up to 25% of the solar panels as an, if a household decide to spend or invest, they can claim up to 25%, but there's a ceiling of up to 15,000. There are big concerns in that area, but I will come back to that when I go to that other side. There was an encouragement, obviously, on the infrastructure and other areas. I think the investment in terms of the police and NPA, knowing our situation. So those are really helpful. I would say another encouraging piece from the budget is the injection into the South African Airways as well as the post office, and from two different aspects. One, we know that we need SAA for a number of reasons, for this economy, for movement, for taking advantage of tourism and other opportunities that are there. And obviously with the restricted SAA, we are really always punching below our potential. The post office is critical in reaching the rural masses, in expanding communication. There's so much that as a country we can do in terms of expanding the telecommunications, in terms of reaching out the people in rural areas. And the post office for generations has been the only, and I'm saying the only, government institution that you would find in every corner, probably even more than where you can find the shebeens. That's been the post office. And its demise is really concerning, because it kind of says we are leaving a lot of our people, a lot of vulnerable people behind. And therefore, an injection that I hope its implementation will lead to addressing those issues. We've seen during COVID how kids in rural areas and people in general were excluded from communication, from attending classes virtually, and all other challenges. And these are the areas where a functioning post office could have tapped in and improved those services. But having said that, I think the National Treasury is not an implementing agent, so it's not going to make those things happen. It can make allocations, it can bring conditions. We still need proper implementation. We still need the responsible departments really to make that happen. So now, basically now going into agriculture, I don't think there were too many surprises in as far as our sector is concerned. For example, the health tax, by keeping it where it was, in a way, I think the minister, that was a sensible option, considering that the sector, but obviously all other sectors are feeling the pressure. But in particular, the sugar industry over the years has been experiencing issues from reduction in the land that is being used, obviously being the one that is mostly irrigated. The cost and the shortage of electricity affect them even more. So you think that this is a bit of a relief by not increasing that health tax. As for sin taxes, alcohol, as well as tobacco, we always expected that. The other good news on the agricultural side is the fact that now the diesel levy that was mentioned would be extended beyond primary agricultural sector into the food production. And I think when you look at the impact of load shedding, you can't stop at the primary agriculture, because you have those broader producers. If the buyers, if those say manufacturers that need to freeze the products to keep them cold, to keep them in the market, if they are affected, that feedback will go back to the primary agriculture. So I've seen that diesel rebate being a bit positive. Chairperson, just finally getting onto the things that, as I said, they are concerning and where I think the minister could have been bold. So going back to the rooftops, I have a number of concerns there. So the first concern is that rebate is only for 1 year. And I'm wondering, why 1 year? I mean, we've been with the challenges of load shedding. We are in the 15th year. Why would you do it for 1 year? Is there a catch? Is there something that we're not aware of that is not being disclosed? But secondly, it is only a rebate claimable when you file the taxes. Now, it will be interesting to see how many households who are able to put those rooftops and solar rooftops and are completing the e-filing system. I want to get to the part where I see the boldness should have gone beyond the panels, which is the rebate is only on the panels. But we know that for a solar system, you still need an inverter. You still need the storage, which are the batteries. And actually, if you think about a system, even a small system costing anything between 50,000 or so, about 60% to 70% of the costs are in the batteries and the inverters. I wonder why, because one would think that the system should have been funded, but extended to the manufacturers. In other words, if we develop our own production of those batteries, because the solars now, I understand that they are 100% imported. So we're missing an opportunity to, activate other economic areas. My last point, Chairperson, I'm aware of the time, is that overall, I think the boldness could have gone towards integrating and creating cohesion amongst policies where these incentives on the solar and renewable energies, partially they feed into the carbon tax, which was announced in 2019, because carbon tax was more penalizing. It was a penalty, but the two that were introduced today, they are incentives. They are an encouragement to invest in the area. But the last leg would have been to really go into the just transition plan, just energy transition plan, which we know it exists. We know that as much as 1.5 trillion rands is mentioned or dedicated to South Africa in various forms, but there hasn't been that, indication of how to grab that. So my point being, this was a little bit more short-term in nature, but we need long-term solutions in the crisis that we have in general. Chairperson, I'll stop here and hopefully the engagements would allow me to expand if necessary. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalaba, and I like your argument that the budget speech was too balanced, and perhaps we needed a bit of skewness in that. With that said, I would want to welcome Mr. Malepana to the floor, and he is the last speaker. If colleagues are having questions, feel free to write them. After Mr. Malepana, then I will open the floor for questions or comments. Mr. Malepana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyoto. I hope you are able to hear me.
Indeed, you are audible.
All right. Thank you for inviting me, and greetings to the colleagues who have joined us here. It's a good thing that, I think a number of issues have been raised. I won't really have to take too long. Otherwise, I'll be echoing what my colleagues here have already mentioned. Maybe as a starting point, I need to just bring to our attention that, the trend that seemed to be followed, if you look at our budget speech and so on in general, is that we, as a country, we seem to always operate in a crisis mode, always managing crisis instead of, sort of forward looking. So you notice that not so long ago, we were preoccupied with, land transfer, expropriation of land, and we were later preoccupied with the crisis around COVID, and now we're managing the crisis around energy. So I think we need to sort of change our thinking such that we are more forward-looking, and that is something that, you know, was echoed in this budget speech. Having said that, whenever one, you know, it's listening to a budget speech, you always look forward to about 4 key issues. One, it's the interventions really that speaks to how we are going to grow our economy. Secondly, is the issue that deals with our triple challenges of, you know, unemployment, inequality, and the poverty that we find the country in. And having said that, I think, you know, the budget speech indeed was really balanced towards, you know, achieving those four main issues. One is that the ESCOM debt relief, indeed, it's really welcome, as well as making this crisis more than just a crisis of ESCOM, but the crisis of a nation by incentivizing individuals and business to invest in solar. But what I like also about that is that through the, you know, installation or more adoption of solar, it's more emphasis around the involvement of more participants, the inclusivity that we always speak about, and that on its own, it's likely to yield, you know, employment rates that, you know, we want to see sort of going forward. Also, if you look at the budget speech really from an agricultural point of view, you'll notice that really we were not really, as a sector, a focus of attention. However, the areas that were touched, they speak to creating an enabling environment for the agricultural sector to prosper. The investment in infrastructure, for instance, around 900 billion, it's earmarked to go towards investment in infrastructure, including investment towards, you know, our dams, so that the envisaged, you know, irrigation plans that we had in our NDP are likely to be embarked on, so that we create the employments that we wanted to get to. Also, speaking of forward-looking, the issue around how we deal with climate change. We are here today, but we are anticipating your La Nina, and we sort of are likely to see more, you know, of this climate-related, you know, or challenges, and there's a sense that we are proactive around that. The issue of prioritizing rural safety, I'm really commending the minister around that, in the sense that if you look in the agricultural sector, indeed, the stock theft that we really see in our rural economy, it's really exorbitant to a point that people are no longer interested in investing in livestock, for instance. But that intervention of adding more numbers in the police space, it's really commended. I think I will pause here for now, Chair, and, you know, allow for sort of further engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. That rounds up the contributions from our panelists. I would want to ask the members of the panel before I open the floor for questions. I don't see a hand, then I would assume that that's okay. Members of the session, the floor is open for you to ask the panelists any questions, and if you would want to make a contribution, that is also permitted. I don't see hands. Mr. Professor Ndimba, your hand is up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm looking at the time and I was worried. I wanted to hear more, but I thought you were going to close the meeting if nobody raises a hand. But I think just echoing everybody's sentiment that it is a good idea, initiative. Thanks for inviting me and everybody else. I I think we wanted to zoom obviously into our area. By the way, my name is Bongani Ndemba. I work for the ARC, responsible for wine and fruit research based in Stellenbosch. So yes, I think the budget vote speech was of interest. I was still reading it. I didn't get the chance to go through everything, but I think this panel is assisting, particularly by zooming into our agri sector. Well, as a research institute or institution, I think that we have really not made enough of our case to have a sufficient sort of influence into where we as the country are going in terms of our investment in R&D and innovation. We do know that we had a target more than 10 years ago that we should get 1% of our GDP invested in R&D, let alone the agricultural R&D. And I think Mr. Kalaba did mention some figures that were declared in Malabo Declaration, which also demonstrated at another level that the budget talk on agriculture was not demonstrating any urgency or any elevation of this sector into its contribution to the GDP or to the economy. But I want to ask him, what do those numbers talk to? 10% budget towards agriculture. I wasn't sure whether it is a stimulation of the agricultural contribution to the GDP or investment in agricultural infrastructure. I wasn't sure. But I think overall, I just wanted to raise those remarks and ask the specific question to Mr. Kalaba. And last but not least, how maybe directly to NAMC in this case, because I think that's much more relevant for this discussion, is what NAMC is responsible for, by and large, and in control of, not putting you in the spot, colleagues, but how then do we, is this budget vote incentivizes or discouraging the investment in agricultural research and agricultural performance when we look at what NAMC is managing, at least in control of, with regards to the applications of levies, investment of those levies, and making sure that what is promised in the applications by the private sector is actually indeed implemented. I'm talking about transformation here. I'm talking about market access. I'm talking about R&D as particular key heads of their budget submissions to you, colleagues. So yeah, thanks a lot for the opportunity. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Professor Ndimba, for that contribution. Mr. Hale, do you want to respond to the question in respect of the share of allocation to agriculture?
Yeah, thank you. The commitment is an allocation of 10% to the agriculture sector. And there are a number of things that are measured that would benefit from that 10%. And the assumption underlying that is an investment against each of those things triggers economic growth. It addresses a lot of the ills that we have currently, the poverty, the unemployment, especially amongst the youth and women. And if we look at the commitments, maybe I can share briefly. The commitments that were made include the CADI process itself. A country would have to align with the CADI process, which means our agricultural planning and our focus areas and are aligned. So that was the first. And almost every country does score well on that, regardless of the fact that we would have challenges in some instances where moving out plans and the way we do things to aligning with the CATI process doesn't necessarily happen overnight. It's a process. The second is in investment finance to agriculture. This is directly by government or by government exciting or inviting the private sector and development partners to partner government, hold hands, and jointly administer resources to agriculture. So where we are, for instance, looking at in the incentive in the energy sector, the same could be done in agriculture, where we would then have incentives that bring private funding into agriculture. And that is something that we can look at in this budget. Then we have had challenges of late, starting, say, with COVID. We have the long-term effects of climate change. We are currently dealing with the effects of the Ukraine-Russia, on our food. Food inflation is high. I know that for South Africa, it's moved by more than a percentage point, if not 1.5% from December to January, and it's increasing. So when you look at that, it flies in the face of the objective or commitment to end hunger. And the number of people who are not food secure is increasing, not only for South Africa, but for the region. So there is that, and there is an allocation of funds that would then go to activities or interventions that seek to address that. Then you look at intra-Africa trade. I see in the chat there is the question on what does the 1 billion mean for agricultural sector, for the one for emergency relief. If you look at the intra-Africa trade that we have, it's skewed not in favor of the continent, with us trading more with those people. As you can see, we are suffering because Ukraine, so far away, is fighting with Russia, not necessarily because Zimbabwe or Malawi, or which are in the region, have problems. And to try and avoid that is to bring trade closer home, and we do this at home. So that 1 billion for emergency relief, if it created a market for producers in South Africa, regions where there are no crises, or countries next to South Africa where there is no crisis, that 1 billion would work to promote agriculture. But the general observation is when we do have the sex come marked clearly, aid from the American people, and they are coming from so far away from the region, and in most cases, not even in Africa. So coming to that intra-Africa trade, South Africa is the pivot for trade in Africa. If you look at how most of the countries are landlocked and relying on South Africa for infrastructure, where South Africa does not perform, the whole region does not perform. And currently South Africa is scoring well below the target for what it should achieve, what it should bring on board, what development should be in place for it to play that pivotal role. So that again talks to allocation to it may not appear in this budget as a direct allocation to agriculture, but it's infrastructure that is in sectors, but has a bearing on agriculture, and we would need to look at that. Then resilience to climate variability. With this minimal growth in terms of allocation, but increasing magnitude of climate change variability and effects, there is need for funding that talks to those things. Look at what's happening to the eastern part of the country. Over the last 3 years, we are now used to cyclones and massive destruction and loss in terms of agricultural productivity. A budget needs to be sensitive to that in terms of allocation and what needs to happen. How do we build the resilience of our emerging farmers against this? And that talks to an increase, a need for an increase in agricultural allocation. And then finally, the mutual accountability. We are accustomed to doing the jobs that we do. And when we append our signatures and say we are going to do things this way, people within the departments are not necessarily going to expand their capability to handle things. There is need sometimes for restructuring, adding more on bodies, and coming up with new processes. That would also talk to a budgetary allocation. But overall, the 10% allocation to agriculture is because of all the levers that we have in front of us The one lever that which, when we touch, has the greatest impact in terms of addressing the ills that we are suffering now is agriculture, because our economies are agro-driven. Yes, we do have mining, we have other industries, but agriculture in the value chain post-production stands or gives a better chance for us to address. So in terms of budgetary allocation, at least that is the observation in countries in the region, your Zimbabwe, your Mauritius, Zambia, Malawi. You would like to prioritize agriculture so that you do take a lot of our people who are unemployed into some form of gainful employment where they are either producing or in the industries post-production. Thank you. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you, Francis, for that. And I would allow each of the panelists a minute or two to have a reflection on the comments that Professor Ndimba made and the comment that is written in the chat session. Dr. Kalaba. In case you are talking, Dr. Kalaba, you are muted.
Thanks, Chairperson. No, I wasn't talking. I was trying to find my unmute button. So yes, I did find it. I think maybe just to respond to the question posted on the chart about what does the infrastructure spend or allocation means, as well as in the context of the relief that can be expected. And I think that is linked to the ongoing or the state of disaster declaration in the context of the floods that we have currently. So yes, about $1 billion has been allocated for infrastructure, but we have to be aware that that is for the entire economy, of which already half of it is already on transport and logistics, central as well as water and sanitation. So they are responsible for about half. And then for agriculture, I think the water and sanitation is critical for irrigation. But I think in a way that the state of disaster relief works, and I'm speaking under correction because this is not my area, is that when you have emergencies of that nature, so resources do not necessarily have to come directly from the, say, agencies, the departments or sectors affected, but those resources can be drawn from previously allocated and not used funds, can be drawn from other resources that it is possible in this current financial year to shift it forward so that you can address an emergency. I mean, if the bridge has collapsed and people have got no accommodation, it can't wait for the next financial year. So considering that the floods have massive implication for the sector, I would foresee a situation where these additional resources would be linked to investments or to address some of the challenges that are really in our sector directly, in addition to our usual challenges that we face. So let me stop here and give others a chance also to respond to that.
Thank you, Dr. Kalaba. Mr. Nkunjana.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so mine is just to sort of an addition, because I wanted to just talk around what Dr. Kalaba has just said. In terms of agricultural industry specifically, from the budget speech, there's not much per se that was directed to it, but I think a lot of critical issues that were touched on, they are related to it, or at least they are important in terms of making sure that the industry is as viable or it's operational. For an example, if you bring in the issue of operation, that aspect, it has been affected negatively by the issue of ESCOM per se. And also, there's also Doc has mentioned the issue of rebates from the diesel and all that. So those are things that I think, as much as there was not much directly said about the industry, but a lot of things, including the infrastructure. If you are to think about, for example, the president has mentioned the bridges that are being built in KZN, a number of them. So those were follow up, not necessarily to deal with the agricultural issues, but because it's an infrastructure thing that is directly impacting into the agricultural sector. It is important those that are being addressed, and therefore, as soon as we have those which are more of an operation kind of a thing, then the sector itself, I think, is in a position to strive. For an example, if you talk about the transformation, that there's a comment around that. Even the master plan, it touches on this. We cannot be able to achieve the goals of transformation within that master plan if you don't have an economy that is functioning. And therefore, there's no economy that will function without ESCOM or the infrastructure to support it, except the situation for the citrus industry, for example. That one is a different situation, which is directly talking to to the market, which is something that I think it needs another agency. But as far as the industry is concerned, for me, it was not necessarily an issue to not hear, a direct kind of a mention of the sector itself. But I think the issues that are being addressed from the budget itself are important, because they're going to make sure that it's a kind of available. I mean, we have a sector that is operational, even though it's not perfect, but I think it's operational. Therefore, if we address these issues like the electricity, the infrastructure, as you are aware that those are things that have been mentioned, the logistics and so forth. Remember not so long ago, in October, November last year, we have issues with Transnet and all that. So those are issues that I think the infrastructure part is going to address, and therefore it makes the industry, operationally. And then as far as the emergency sort of issues that to address immediate relief is, I think
Mr. Nkunjana, so that in the next 6 minutes, I have the other colleagues have the say.
Okay, just okay, I'm finishing, Chair. So as for the relief fund, I think there's a bit of skewness in terms of bringing that into upfront, because I mean, like now you have to look into this. About 7 provinces in South Africa have been affected by the disaster, and therefore that money, I think around 700 million is not going to be sufficient, especially if you are to look into the issues of bringing farmers that can be assisted and all that. But I think that money is close to like issues like providing parcel foods and all that. Due to time constraint, Chair, I'm not going to get into a lot of other things that I want to say. Thanks for now, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malepan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think if you zoom into the budget speech, it becomes a little bit, challenging for one to draw, some insight, especially as it has to do with the agriculture sector. I think maybe we may need to have a further discussion when the Minister of Agriculture give their own, budget vote, so that, we interrogate what speaks to what we're dealing with in the sector. Having said that, Chair, I'm really happy with the injections into our state-owned entities. I mean, you'll notice that if there are challenges in our state-owned entities, for instance, your ARC, your land bank, it opens a room for operation of the private sector, of which is nothing bad about that, but it becomes really a challenge in terms of affordability for those who have not really established themselves to get, sort of services from the private sector, as will be someone who is sort of affording. In addition, the 5 billion allocation to the land bank is really, really welcome, and hopefully it will get the land bank to where it's supposed to be. Just to respond to the intervention on disaster relief fund, Chair, you notice that in the agricultural sector, the intervention whenever it comes to disaster has always been the challenge around the prolonged period between when the disaster hits and when the intervention comes. And if we have an allocation of that nature, it becomes even easier, so that we shorten the period between the disaster and when the intervention comes. Sitting here, Chair, I mean, we had disasters in KZN, but still today there are still those who are affected and are yet to be supported. So we need more of much efficient interventions when it comes to that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malepan. Dr. Thindisa?
Thanks, Chair. I'm invited here as a bureaucrat, Chair, so I'm going to try to stick to policy and not venture into other spaces, because sometimes I'm tempted to to breach the boundary. But quickly, Chair, because we're running out of time, the issue of the diesel rebate, which currently is available, unfortunately, is through the VAT system, through SARS. And as a department, we are canvassing. We'll put proposals to National Treasury and SARS to unblock the tedious and complex requirements to be able to access that, in particular for small and medium agribusinesses, but also smallholder farmers, because there is a threshold where some of them are not required to comply to some of the things, to some of the tedious requirements. The same applies to the requirements on accessing or unlocking resources for the disaster, as the previous speaker has said. We're really pushing to say the sooner they come, the better, because agriculture is seasonal by its nature. But coupled to that, Chair, is that we are also lobbying to expand the zero-rated VAT basket, because currently it covers quite a few of them, but we think it should even cover more, so that we can be part of the relief in terms of social package. Second, but not least, is the issue of the 10%, and we agree that as a republic, we have signed off on the commitments at the AU, and 10% is one of those. But the reality of the matter is that, as the minister said today, the fiscus is constrained. The revenue streams, of course, they've increased by 90 or so billion rands, but unfortunately, the expenditure side is spiking, and now you need to balance the two. You need to prioritize and ensure that you cover all the bases that you would want to cover. Research for development, I think it's a self-explanatory, Chair. There is a need to ramp it up so that we become competitive. But last, Chair, the budget speech is unlikely to reflect the granular details of each and every department. That would be done through the budget vote 29, when the minister tables it in Parliament. That's where we'll be able to find details of the budget that we'll be receiving as a department. What will it be used for? At least I can say with confidence that the previous financial year we had about 17 to 18 billion rands. And there were details of what it's going to do. The same will apply in terms of this financial year.
Thank you,
unfortunately,
Dr.
due to so avoiding to encroach and how
is it on my side that you are breaking, but nonetheless, I hear that you have just concluded. Thank you very much. At this point in time, I would want to welcome Ms. Kumbuzile Soma to do a closing remarks before we have the session closed. It has come out quite clearly that 1 hour is not enough. Going forward, we will plan better, and surely we would have robust engagements. We are not going to run away from any of the matters that we should be talking about. Sis Kumbu.
Thank you, Mr. Nyodo. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Firstly, I would like to thank the NAMC for organizing this engagement. It is very important that after the budget vote, we put our head together and just highlight the winners and the losers of the budget vote. Secondly, I would like to thank our panel for highlighting the important part of the budget vote. And I'll just highlight a few that I've found to be of importance. Firstly, the speakers highlighted that the budget vote was balanced and fair. And what was encouraging is the mention of ESCOM. As we all know that the issue of electricity is a major challenge, especially when it comes to our economy. It was also highlighted that the tax collection was higher than what was expected, and that means that the government will be able to do what is expected to be done, especially when it comes to the interventions that are highlighted on the speech. On the policy point of view, it was highlighted that the allocation for agriculture was around 5%, and that shows that the region is in distress, especially now that we've just come out of COVID. And one of the speakers highlighted that agriculture was not a point of focus, especially on agriculture, but we appreciate whatever that is allocated. One of the speakers mentioned that National Treasury is not an implementing agent. Therefore, a lot of efforts and a lot of work needs to be channeled in ensuring that the programs are properly implemented in order to achieve the desired outcome for the growth of the economy. With that being said, colleagues and Chairperson, I would like to thank our participants who attended this meeting. I would like to thank you, colleagues, for your interest, for your comments and inputs and questions. I believe that this is not the end of engagement. So the engagement needs to continue beyond this platform in order for us to share ideas on how to grow the economy. Lastly, colleagues, I would like to thank our chairperson, Mr. Nyodo, for steering the ship for us. You did a sterling job, sir, in ensuring that this meeting runs smooth, and also for sticking with time. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
With that, colleagues, the meeting or the session is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right. Bye.